My name is Victor, I'm 35 years old, and today I'm going to tell the most painful story of my life. Up until 3 years ago, I was just another dad who thought he was doing his best for his kids. I worked 12-hour shifts on commercial construction sites, came home exhausted, and often took my frustration out on my family. My wife, Angela, was always far too patient with me. David, my oldest son, was only 9 years old when everything fell apart. My daughter Emily, 6, was the light of my life, but I was so blinded by stress and anger that I couldn't see the damage I was doing to them. Alcohol started as a way to unwind. A beer after work to relax. Then 2, 3, until it became a necessity. When I drank, I turned into someone else. I'd yell over anything, throw things, and worst of all, I terrified my own children. Angela tried to help me many times. She asked me to seek help, threatened to leave, but I'd always promise I'd change and never did. Until one December night, after another fight where I smashed dishes and screamed at the kids, she made the hardest decision of her life. She took the kids and left. I woke up the next morning to an empty house and a note on the kitchen table. Victor, I can't expose the kids to this anymore. I'm going to my mom's. When you're ready to get real help, we'll talk. Angela. At first, I thought she'd come back. That it was just a scare tactic like before. But weeks passed. Then months. Angela filed for divorce and, even worse, asked for full custody of the kids, claiming I was a danger to them. My world collapsed. I was only allowed to see David and Emily on weekends, and under supervision. Even then, when I arrived to pick them up, I saw the fear in my son's eyes. David, who used to run into my arms, now hid behind his mom. Then my attorney gave me the news that made my heart stop. Angela was filing to cut off all visitation. And to do that, she needed to prove in court that I was unfit. Which meant David, my 9-year-old boy, would have to testify against me. But he's just a child, I said. Exactly why his words matter so much, my lawyer replied. Children don't lie about this kind of thing. The months leading up to the trial were the darkest of my life. I knew I had done wrong, but the idea of seeing my own son testify against me was unbearable. I started going to Alcoholics Anonymous. Not because anyone forced me, but because I finally admitted I had a serious problem. At the meetings, I heard stories that sounded just like mine. Men and women who had lost everything because of alcohol. That's where I met Mike, a man in his 50s who hadn't seen his kids in over 15 years. You still have a shot, he told me. I didn't change when I had the chance. I also started therapy with Dr. Harris, a psychologist who helped me understand that my anger didn't just come from work or stress. It came from deeper wounds, from my childhood, from a difficult relationship with my own father, who was also an alcoholic. You're repeating a cycle, she said in one session. But cycles can be broken. During that time, I wrote letters to David and Emily that I never sent. I apologized, explained that I was trying to change, told them I loved them more than anything. But I knew words weren't enough. March 15th is a date I'll never forget. I arrived at the family court with my heart pounding so hard it felt like it would burst. My attorney tried to calm me, but I could only think about one thing. In just a few hours, my 9-year-old son would take the stand and tell a judge why he didn't want to see me anymore. Angela arrived with the kids a few minutes later. Emily ran over and hugged me tightly. Daddy, why are you sad? She asked with that innocence only children have. David stayed beside his mother, looking at me with an expression I couldn't read. The hearing started. Angela's attorney presented evidence, photos of broken furniture, audio recordings of me yelling, medical reports documenting her stress. Each piece of evidence felt like a dagger. I saw the man I had become through other people's eyes, and it was awful. Then came the moment I dreaded most. The judge said, David Ramirez, please take the stand. My son walked up to the stand with small, hesitant steps. He was wearing a blue shirt I had given him for his birthday. His hands trembled slightly. Judge Harrison leaned forward, speaking gently. Hi, David. Do you know why you're here today? Yes, sir. To talk about my dad. And do you promise to tell the truth? I promise. What followed was the most painful 20 minutes of my life. In a soft but steady voice, my 9-year-old son described our home life. My dad came home from work really angry. He drank something that made him yell really loud. Mom tried to calm him down, but he would break dishes. Emily and I would go to our room and cover our ears. Were you afraid of your dad, David? He looked at me for the first time since taking the stand. Our eyes met, and I saw tears forming in his. Sometimes. When he drank, he got really different. He didn't feel like my dad anymore. I couldn't hold it in anymore. The tears ran down my face. They weren't tears of self-pity, they were tears of sorrow for the fear I had caused my son. Angela's attorney continued asking David delicate questions. My son answered with heartbreaking honesty. David, do you remember the last night before your mom left with you and your sister? Yes. Dad broke Grandma's plates. Mom was crying. Emily was really scared, so I held her hand in our room. And how did you feel in that moment? David paused for a few seconds. Then, in an even softer voice, he said, I just wanted Dad to stop being mad. I wanted him to go back to being nice like before. Those words hit me like a lightning bolt. My son wasn't testifying out of hatred. He was simply telling the truth about how my actions had hurt him. And deep down, I realized he still loved me, despite everything. My attorney was given a chance to ask questions. He was gentle, asking about the good times we'd shared. David, do you remember happy moments with your dad? My son's eyes lit up slightly. Yes. He taught me how to play soccer in the yard. And he made funny voices when he read us bedtime stories. Do you miss those things? I do. I want Dad to do that again. When it was my turn to speak, I stood up on shaking legs. I looked at the judge, then Angela, then my children, and finally at David, who sat beside his mother. Your Honor, I began, my voice trembling, I can't deny anything said here today. Every word from my son is true. I was a terrible father, a terrible husband, and a man who lost control of his life. I took a deep breath. But I want everyone to know that I've been sober for 3 months. It's not a long time, I know. But it's a start. I go to AA 3 times a week and therapy twice a week. I pulled some papers from my pocket. These are my program participation certificates, reports from my psychologist, and a letter from my AA sponsor. The judge reviewed the documents. Mr. Ramirez, what would you like to say to your son? I turned to David, who was watching me intently. David, I did a lot of bad things. I scared you, your sister, and your mom. There's no excuse for that. But I want you to know I'm trying to be a better person. Not so the judge lets me see you, but because you deserve a father you're not afraid of. Judge Harrison stepped out to consider everything presented. The 30 minutes we waited felt like an eternity. Angela and I didn't speak. We just watched our kids playing quietly in a corner of the courtroom. When the judge returned, his face was serious. This is a very sensitive case, he began. We have a child who was clearly traumatized by his father's actions, but also a father who seems genuinely committed to change. He looked straight at me. Mr. Ramirez, do you understand that trust isn't rebuilt overnight? I understand, Your Honor. And that the children's well-being is my top priority? Yes, sir. He gave his ruling. Mr. Ramirez's visitation rights will remain suspended for another 6 months. During that time, he must continue treatment and submit monthly progress reports. After 6 months, the case will be reviewed again. My heart sank, but I knew it was fair. Additionally, the judge continued, Mr. Ramirez may write letters to his children, which will be screened by their mother first. It was a small relief, but it was something. The next 6 months were the most difficult and transformative of my life. Every day was a battle against the urge to drink, against anger, against self-pity. At AA, I talked about David's testimony. How it felt to hear my son tell a stranger why he feared me. Other members shared similar stories, and that helped me realize I wasn't alone. I wrote one letter each week to David and Emily. At first, they were full of apologies. Then I began writing about my recovery, what I was learning about myself. I shared happy memories and promised to create new ones. Angela called me a few times to say the kids liked the letters. David always asks when the next one is coming, she told me once. In therapy, Dr. Harris helped me confront the roots of my anger. We worked through childhood trauma, my relationship with my father, and how to break the emotional cycle of family pain. I also started volunteering at a nonprofit that helps families affected by domestic violence. Seeing others in even tougher situations gave me perspective and purpose. On the day of my 6-month review, I was a different man. Not just sober, but genuinely changed. I'd lost weight, my eyes were clearer, and for the first time in years, I felt at peace with myself. I presented all my medical reports, certificates, and letters of recommendation from my sponsor and the nonprofit. But the most powerful moment came when David, now 10, told the judge, "I want to see my dad again." His letters are different now. He seems different too. The judge allowed supervised visits, once a week. At our first meeting, David ran to hug me. Emily shouted "Daddy," and jumped into my arms. "You really are different, Dad," David said as we walked through the park. "What do you mean, son? Your eyes look happy again." Today, 2 years after that hearing, I have regular visits with my kids. Angela and I are slowly working toward reconciliation, with therapy and open conversations. I don't know if we'll rebuild our marriage, but we're better co-parents now. I've been sober for almost 3 years. I still attend AA and therapy. David, now 11, plays soccer with me every Saturday. Emily, now 8, still asks for silly voices at bedtime. That day in court, when I saw my 9-year-old son take the stand, was the worst and the best day of my life. The worst because it showed how far I'd fallen. The best because it became the turning point I needed. Now I understand, David didn't testify against me, he testified for the family he wanted back. And thanks to that brave little boy, we found our way back to each other. If you're going through something similar, know this: it's never too late to change. It's never too late to be the parent your children deserve. The road is hard, but every tear, every struggle, every small win is worth it. Because in the end, a family's love is the most powerful force in the world, and it's always worth fighting for.